Hello and welcome to the Garden of the Black Roses. This is the next chapter in my original story, The Adventures of the Iron Wolves, Book 1, Alpha, Chapter 5, Stumbling into Battle Blind. To Rue and the Lunarian healer's dismay, Anima began walking around a few days after she woke up. They continually told her she could do more injury to herself without her sight. Anima took her time walking from her room to the dining hall for breakfast. Her hands ran along the wall, giving her a sense of security. Rue walked along beside her quietly. She had refused to let him guide her, saying she wanted some semblance of independence. She wore her court gown with a white cotton cloak. Her pouch and rapier sat on her right hip. "You sure?" Rue asked for what Anima thought was the 100th time. "You could get lost, or worse, hurt, if you don't let us guide you." He heard the distinct sound of Anima drawing her rapier. "You can't hit me. Mariel didn't teach you how to sense attacks." "Who said someone else didn't teach me?" she said, raising her rapier and pointing it at him, the point only just touching his Adam's apple. "I can sense you easily." He swallowed hard, feeling the point press threateningly. "You'd really stab me?" "No," she replied, "just showing you that your presence is as large as a dragon." She walked off down the hall, sheathing her sword as she walked. Rue watched her warily. Anima continued on until she reached the dining room, where she stopped dead in her tracks. 3, she thought, feeling Rue catch up to her. Most likely Father and Crystal, but who's the third? "Kite," Rue said softly in her ear, as if he had read her thoughts. He watched Kite come up and cup Anima's cheeks with her hands. "Kite, she refused help to come here." "It's to be expected," Kite replied in her clipped way of speaking. "She's an independent lass, so even being carried by Stykes all the way here must have been damaging for her." How many found out his secret because of me? Anima wondered, as the soft feather touch of healing brushed over her body. Hearing a discouraging tone from Kite, she wondered what she had done now. "My dear," Kite said, looking into Anima's eyes, "you still can't see, can you?" Nodding her head, she blinked her eyes. "I wonder what caused this to happen." Kite twisted to look at Crystal. "You don't happen to know, do you?" "I'm an oracle," Crystal said, very upset at Kite's words. Her tone enunciated the word oracle. "I see the future, not the past. I see she'll regain her sight, but I don't see when that is." Kite coughed and grumbled about oracles not being scientific. Crystal snapped at her loudly. "I may not be scientific, but neither are you. You get your powers from this healing sky goddess. How are they more scientific than mine?" Anima pulled away from Kite and stepped out of the room. She wanted to enjoy her meal in peace, not listen to Kite and Crystal snap at each other. She walked carefully up the hall, into her room, and shut the door. I wonder what Stykes is up to. Styx and Mariel sat watching the palace. They had seen the king come and go a number of times with many bodyguards, including Miyako. "How are we going to rescue Miyako without causing a lot of bloodshed?" Styx asked, instantly regretting once he said it. "Who says we need to avoid bloodshed?" Mariel replied calmly. "Miyako is wrongfully imprisoned by a king who was supposed to be our ally." She looked at him, her face twisted with fury. He used a tool of the elves to force Miyako into his service. He hurt Anima. Styx gripped Mariel's arm tightly. "Anima isn't here," he said quietly to her. "He can't hurt someone who isn't here." To his surprise, Mariel shook her head. "You mean in the past?" "Mariel was the first to be captured. Miyako was the first to be captured," Mariel replied, not flinching at his tight grip. "Chie, Anima, and myself fought hard against the king's bodyguards. Anima fought against the king himself. Something happened. I think it was a weapon of some sort, and Anima was sent flying away from the king. It was the most beautiful and the most horrifying thing I've ever seen. Her body just floated as it arced across the sky, but she landed with a crunch." Styx closed his eyes, hearing the sound in his ears. Mariel continued on. "Needless to say, she wasn't conscious after that, and we were no longer able to fight off against the king's bodyguards. Miyako told us to take Anima and run." "Mariel," Styx said, thinking carefully. The crunch sound echoed in his skull, as if clearing his thoughts. "Did Anima know about the red collars? Did she know that the king had the red collar?" Mariel's silence worried him. Did she go into battle blind, or did she know? "We didn't know about the collars until Miyako had one snapped onto her neck," Mariel replied quietly, her voice shaking. "I couldn't sense the collars at all until it was too late." Her voice betrayed her thoughts to Styx. Mariel sensed his impatience and continued unwillingly. "She knew he had a secret weapon. She seemed very unsurprised when he used the weapon to send her flying." "We know now, so it should be all right," Styx said through gritted teeth. His anger clear to Mariel that he wasn't happy about Anima. It wasn't clear on what part he was angry about. His great white wings sprouted and spread elegantly from his back, his elven blood telling him there were red collars nearby. Looking down from their hiding spot, he saw slaves, many, many slaves, all with red collars around their neck. He paused and looked at Mariel curiously. "You know about the butterfly bruise on her back?" Mariel bit her bottom lip in reply. "Was that caused by the weapon you mentioned?" Anima walked around her room, familiarizing herself with her surroundings, her eyes now seeing only very faint outlines of objects. The darker the color of the object, the stronger the outline was. Her ears twitched at the sound of metal ringing against metal. She strained her ears. There shouldn't be fighting in the palace. She knew the grounds and the sky were well protected by Rue and all the factions of the Lunarian guards. Lots of sounds filled her ears now, not just metallic, but shouts filled the air. Drawing her rapier, she stood listening carefully. She could only just make out the shadow of something sitting on her windowsill. Princess Anima, a distinctly male voice said, stepping closer to her. How nice to meet your acquaintance. The shadow bowed to her. Who are you? Anima's voice was firm, despite the fear rippling through her. State your name at once. I'm surprised, the voice said, sounding truly surprised. You don't remember? He darted around her rapier and pulled her close to his chest. His fingers pressed the bruise on her back. What a heavy seal on your memories. Maybe I should release it. He pressed a thumbnail on the bruise. Anima's eyes widened. A scream filled her head. Not hers. A higher voice. A child's voice. Words began to become more distinct in the screams. Mama? Mama! Wake up! They're coming again! Mama! Before she could reply, she felt rough hands grab her from behind. Two people entered her room, one standing in front of her, the other holding her shoulders. Time. Anima heard Rue say in a very dangerous tone, What are you doing here? The screams faded away, leaving her with only the voices of those around her. Time? Anima thought, listening carefully. The hands on her shoulders tightened. Rue said, Time. Whose time? Anima felt one of the hands on her shoulders move to gently take her rapier and slide it back into its sheath. You received my resignation from Angelic, Rue said tensely. Why are you here now? Anima reached out to touch his wings gently, her fear rising from the tone of his voice. I wanted to see who stole your services from me, Time said with a smile, and I must say, you really did outdo yourself. She's a beauty, and well worth serving more faithfully than the guild that raised you. Rue's jawline tensed, the skin pulling taut and white. What's wrong? Did I touch a nerve? As much as I'm grateful to the Angelic Guild for finding and raising me, Rue said softly, fighting his urge to wipe the smug look off of Time's face with his fist. But Anima has given me a purpose and a reason to live. He could feel her touching his wings behind him. I'm indebted to her for this. The hairs on his body rose with the building tension. He lifted his arm to his side, palm facing Time, making it clear he didn't want Anima harmed. Get her out of here, Crystal. Anima's head jerked upwards at the sound of Rue drawing his sword. Rue? Hands pulled her through the door, leading her down the hall. Metal ringing against metal sounded behind her. Crystal? The hand holding hers didn't let go, nor did it stop pulling her along. What's going on? I need to take you to the safety of the Iron Wolf's territory, Crystal said, pulling her through another room with fighting before going down some stairs to the stables. The Angelic Guild is here to kill Rue, the Griffin Guards, and anyone else who stands in their way. Crystal looked back at Anima's confused expression. Time's here to kill you, too. Hurry and remember, my lady. Styx stood amongst the slaves, his eyes sad as they surrounded him with daggers shaking in their hands. How do I free them? He asked Mariel, who was leaning against his back watching the slaves behind him. There's 2 ways, she said quietly. She held Styx's bow taut, with an arrow nocked. One is to kill them. That's usually used by common elves. Elves with royal blood can remove the collars with a touch. You have to want them freed. Don't kill them, Styx warned her. Knock them out if you have to. He moved quickly, his fingers brushing each collar, his mind focused on freeing them all. Freed slaves raised their hands to their throats in disbelief before running away from Styx, Mariel, and the rest of the captured slaves. Mariel slung the bow over her body and fought with only her bare hands. When silence fell, Styx and Mariel stood alone, the ground littered with red collars. What do we do with these? He asked, with his hands spread wide to enunciate the amount of collars on the ground. Summon them to you, Mariel replied. Her sharp eyes darted around, keeping a close lookout for anyone coming near them. They should come and melt into your skin. The collars are made with royal blood, after all. Styx raised his hand and called to the collars silently. They answered his call, liquefying and flowing towards him. They seeped into his skin, mixing into his blood, giving him snippets of memories of the elves they originally had belonged to. A memory of his younger self hugging an older man happily, a kite shaped like a giant butterfly hanging from his arm. Father. Another memory of his younger self running down a white stone hallway towards an elf with emerald green eyes. Shiro. More memories of Shiro flooded his mind. I know who's trading in elven artifacts. He opened his eyes slowly. His body swayed. He looked at Mariel before falling backwards into darkness. Anima wrapped her arms tightly around Crystal's waist and rested her head against her back. Where are we? She asked, unsure if Crystal could hear her words. The speed they travelled seemed to spirit her words away from her lips. Approaching Huster village, Crystal replied, slowing Anima's chestnut mare to a trot. Shouts from the walls reached Anima's ears. They're firing on us. Crystal directed the mare to dodge the flying metal bullets. Her body jerked back. Anima moved her hands to check her body, afraid that she had been hit. Crystal placed Anima's hands back on her stomach. It's all right. I was just grazed by a bullet. That's all. Anima lifted her head and raised 2 fingers to her lips. She blew the long, high-pitched whistle, followed by 3 short, and then another long, low whistle. The gun majors on the walls stopped firing. The gate to Hasta village began to lift, and Crystal cautiously guided the mare in through the gate. She looked around, seeing only swords and spears aimed at them. "Where's Noira?" Anima asked. Her voice travelled in the silence. "As much as I would love to see, so I can memorize who is pointing their weapons at me, I need to speak to Noira. My need to speak to Noira is much more important." Crystal helped her down off the mare and waited. "What is this fuss?" A powerful female voice called. She stepped up and into the ring that surrounded Crystal and Anima. "Anima!" Raising a hand, the knights in the ring lowered their weapons. "Why are you dressed like that?" Crystal raised an arm in front of Anima, unsure who this newcomer was. "You are speaking to the crown princess of Lunarias." Anima's legs crumpled beneath her at these words. Crystal looked down at her with sad eyes. "I'm sorry." "Was it time?" Anima asked, hearing Noira's choked gasp, which turned quickly into a coughing fit. Crystal remained silent, and Anima demanded again, her voice growing more angry. "Was it time who murdered my father?" Her voice shook with anger. Her body shook with anger. Noira wondered how Anima knew Nephlite was dead. Other than the small hint that she was now crown princess, everything else was assumed. She glanced at Crystal, who shrugged, knowing exactly what Noira was thinking. "Once you are safe within the Iron Wolves' headquarters," Crystal said quietly, distracting Anima from her current question temporarily, "I will tell you what happened." She looked up at Noira, who still looked shocked. "Anima is now Crown Princess of Lunarias. From what I understand, she is co-leader to the Iron Wolves as well." She looked around, not disturbed at the amount of armed knights that surrounded them. "But by the looks of this, it's like she's very unwelcome." "Not unwelcome," Noira said, waving her hand to dismiss the knights to their stations. "Just unexpected." She looked down at Anima, trying to keep her voice calm. "Styx didn't mention you were the daughter of King Nephlite." "I asked him not to say anything," Anima replied, not looking up. "Can someone help me up?" Crystal muttered her apologies and helped Anima to her feet. "If you can spare it." She paused, her ears listening carefully. Metallic sounds and war cries were faint in the air. "Can you send some troops to the royal palace of Lunarias? The Angelic Guild is attacking, and I don't know how long our troops can hold out. I can't fight either because of my disability." "I think you need to explain to me a bit more," Noira said, realizing Anima couldn't see. She placed Anima's hands on her arms and guided her towards the barracks in the center of the village. "The war with Solaris is going better than I expected without Styx present. But I need to know the situation in Lunarias before I send aid." Styx opened his eyes, and a different darkness filled his vision. A small hand gently stroked his hair. Feelings of love and admiration flowed from this person. "Anima?" he asked, his voice catching in his throat. "Anima wouldn't have admiration for me." The hand stopped stroking, and a girl with light brown eyes looked down at him. "Mariel." He smiled and tried to lift his head to sit up. "My head feels heavy." "It's because you used a power you aren't used to," she replied. Hurt tones laced her voice. "Breaking down and absorbing artifacts created with the royal blood of the elves uses more than your body can handle." Styx sat up uneasily, pressing a hand to his head. "You shouldn't be moving yet." Styx shook his head furiously, trying to clear it. "Is it night?" he asked, cautiously looking around. "How long have I been out for?" The darkness that dimmed his vision grew with every passing moment. He turned to look at Mariel's face. "It's past the 6th candle hour," Mariel replied, placing a thick white candle between them, with deep grooves marked around in equal intervals. The light from the candle told Styx the darkness in his vision was just his imagination. "You were out for almost a day and a half. I had to carry you from that place before the king's guards came. You were heavy, even for me." She placed into his hand a clay bowl filled with a thick broth. "Eat. You'll feel better." He lifted the spoon to his lips and blew gently before tasting what she had given him. His face crinkled slightly and looked at her with a very plain but rude question on his face. Mariel laughed and leaned towards him. Same reaction as Anima. She didn't like it either. "I guess you aren't used to elven recipes." Styx finished the broth in the bowl before saying anything in response. "It's not that I don't like it," he said, placing the bowl down on the ground. "It's just that it's not what I was expecting." He looked up, studying her carefully. "Who were you before you came through the gate into the human world?" He touched his lips lightly with his fingers. The taste was familiar. Mariel looked away, her cheeks colouring. "I was your maid in the palace. I was also your first—" She trailed off, not looking at Styx. She laughed ruefully before continuing. "Funny how my current mistress is the one you love now." Okay, I'm going to pause here. The rest of this chapter is basically Styx remembering back to when Mariel took his first time. And then him realizing that she has weakened him. She hid something in the broth and weakened him, and has her way with him. Yeah. I will leave it at that. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. If you want to actually read what I've written for that remainder bit, because I'm just censoring for the sake of YouTube, look in the comments below. There should be a link to the story. Yeah. But yeah. And as always, let your imagination run wild. Bye for now.